this forum tonight and for inviting me. I actually did not prepare a very long presentation because I know that I have to give some time to interpretation and also to give some time to question and answer, the question and answer forum. So you have to excuse me for reading from a paper that I prepared for tonight. It's titled "The Filipino Comfort Women and Continuing Women's Rights Violations in the Philippines." I think you just have to tell me when to stop for translation, ano? Okay. So
you can have a little pause, right, for the translator. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, translator. Okay.
I think I will need to listen to. Okay. Okay. So can I proceed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. The Filipino Comfort Women and Continuing Women's Rights Violations in the Philippines. It is almost 3 decades since the first Filipino comfort women came forward with their harrowing stories. Joint efforts by women's groups, advocates, and experts established the irrefutable fact that the conduct of the Japanese Imperial Army in enslaving Filipino women was followed a set of orders from higher command and was implemented in many places where troop formations turned existing structures such as houses, churches, hospitals, municipal buildings into garrisons where they took prisoners, among them hundreds, probably thousands of women, mainly Filipinos, and turned them into sex and domestic slaves.
Sige lang, Sharon, naka-share screen yung paper mo.
Sige. The total number of women documented by the then Task Force on Filipino Comfort Women amounted to only 174 out of the hundreds that came forward. A small number, as the task force had relied solely on private support and initiative to verify and document the victims' stories. It did not help as well that the Philippines has a very poor record at historical preservation. The Japanese Imperial Army had destroyed much of the incriminating records, and succeeding puppet governments had little interest in preserving the country's historical records pertaining to colonial wars launched by foreign powers such as the US and Japan in the country. The Comfort Women movement in the Philippines has had a long history of struggle as well, from street protests, lobbying, legal battles, but past and current Philippine governments have remained indifferent, if not outright obstructionist, of the calls for justice and historical inclusion of the comfort women issue. This is for the simple reason that Japan remains, notwithstanding the recent grand entrance of China into the Philippine political economic scene and the long-standing US domination in the Philippines, Japan remains as the #1 creditor country today. Or today, as in past administrations, Japanese official development assistance finances many flagship government projects that are also a major source of graft and corruption for the bureaucrats in power. This places Japan in an extremely favorable position to dictate on the Philippine governments, who are known to have an insatiable appetite for bureaucratic largesse. It is not surprising, therefore, that 2 comfort women statues were removed in 2018 after the Japanese government expressed regret over the installation of these statues. On the other hand, memorials to fallen Japanese military generals and soldiers have been erected in different parts of the country, apparently in agreements with either local or national governments, notably in provinces that have vastly benefited from Japanese ODA. Today, only a handful of the victims survive, and the Philippines is ruled by a government that simply does not recognize the right to dissent and puts no value on human rights, particularly that of women. It is a government subservient to three major powers, first the US and now China, and of course Japan, its main creditor. Japan has put up an aggressive propaganda campaign, trumpeting its important role in promoting, quote, industrial development, unquote, scientific research and training, etc., in the country. In fact, one of its claimed most significant contribution has been the granting of ODA to the development of, quote, industrial corridors, which housed special economic zones that in reality have severely exploited Filipino labor, particularly that of young Filipino women. 30 years after, we find our country host again to Japan, this time not as an invaded country, but as a neo-colony dependent on Japanese quote-unquote aid. But as one of the Filipino comfort women puts it, her name is Lola Estelita D, why do we have to be grateful for this when we are going to pay for these loans anyway? It is also ironic that the first time that Japan sent out soldiers for a war exercise after the peace clause was put into its constitution was on Philippine soil in 2018 to participate in a war exercise that was led by the US. So this is the current political economic context that the Philippine comfort women finds itself in. Filipino comfort women have lost 3 legal battles filed through the years, both in Tokyo and Philippine courts. Part of the grounds cited was that the damages have already been paid through the post-war treaties signed by both countries. But this is a barefaced lie. The issue of the comfort women came up only in 1992, almost 20 years after the last of the reparations were made by Japan in the late 1970s. The reparations had been mainly in the form of industrial goods and services, with only a small fraction going supposedly to war veterans and their families. There was no mention whatsoever of reparation for individual civilians who have died or been injured in the war, much less who have suffered forced labor or sexual slavery in the hands of the Japanese. The unfinished battle of Filipino comfort women is but one of the many issues of women's rights violations confronting Filipino women today under a presidency that wantonly violates civil liberties and human rights. It is using the disguise of an overbroad and overarching anti-terror law it recently imposed in order to curtail freedom of dissent and the right to self-organization. It is an extremely misogynist government that has often literally taken liberties against women, exposed them to ridicule, pumped up bloodlust among his soldiers by encouraging soldiers to shoot women rebels in the vagina, and so on. Yet against Japan, it can only wag its tail when the Japanese government says no to the memory of its wartime crimes and acts meeker than a lamb when the responsibility should be to negotiate with the Japanese government on behalf of all the victims of Japanese wartime slavery. But the Philippine comfort women remain unfazed. Comfort women movement remain unfazed. Today, with the realities of another foreign aggression reverberating throughout the nation, young people, especially young women, are being increasingly drawn to supporting the struggles of Filipino comfort women. Lila Pilipina today runs on the volunteer labor of both descendants and youth volunteers. The realities of military sexual violence being experienced by women in current-day wars, such as what is happening in Myanmar and Afghanistan, even makes it more urgent for them to become vigilant and active in campaigning not just for justice for Filipino comfort women, but against all forms of wars of aggression or intervention and the massive military sexual violence it spawns on women of the conquered population. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was concise. Thank you, comrade. So, may we now call on Dr. Retna Ningsi for her presentation. Dr. Umi, good evening.
evening. I'm ready. Good evening. I'm ready.
Yes, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you share my document, please?
You mean
Yes,
the-
yes, I will share screen.
Okay, okay.
Here I'm gonna share from Indonesian perspective about comfort women. So we know that under Japanese military occupation on March 8, 1942 until 1945, August 25, that quite many Indonesian young females suffer from what we call Jugun Ianfu or military comfort woman, or euphemised as comfort woman, that around 200,000 young Asian women aged 13 to 15 years from Korea, China, and Indonesia were deceived for being recruited as performer or singers, or studying, or also teaching for nursing. In Indonesia itself, it's going to be 1,100 Jagun Ianfu. And here there is one survivor that just passed away, Mariam, as a victim from Yogyakarta, Indonesia, as my hometown. And survivor narration of the rape experience in Indonesia are anger, ape or stain, sakit hati or wounded heart, pahit, very painful, or shame to families and community. And Mariam and her friends had their bitter experience to be placed in a Japanese military camp with small partition rooms to have sex without consent and love. 20 until 30 Japanese young military people every day. Unless they got menstruation, it's really tortured, yeah. And then Japanese young military forces were survived but surface for sexual ones to improve their motivation to win the war. That's the reason by Japanese government to have that camp. And then to avoid pregnancy, actually, the soldier on the military, Japanese military, they had to wear condoms, but several of them disobeyed. So what happened? There's a cases of pregnancy. And then when the women got pregnant, they were forced to do abortion that really injured to their production organ, not only their feeling, but also their production organs. So having a Japanese life in Indonesia, actually, the women were free from the camps and they can return to the family, but their life still suffering. Why? Because rarely that Indonesian men and parents take them as wife or daughter-in-law, because they got stigma as prostitute, even though against their will. Also in patriarchy society like Indonesia, virginity is required. That's Indonesia culture. So a woman has to be clean from homage thoughts, meaning no sex before marriage. So it was really hard for ex-comfort women to have family. Why? Because if they got married, it will end with this divorce because of sadness or bad images. So the majority of them still suffer from society exclusion and poor living. The women did not have any chance to running from the camps at the time, since it was established and managed by Japanese authority. Guardians supervised them intensively. So never the story of comfort woman free from the camp. Would you please like to go below? Yeah. And what about sexual violence and women protection in Indonesia? Actually, it still happened for sexual attacks or including mass rape against Chinese women during May 1998 riot. That's also, and also many sexual violence, including in campuses in Indonesia. And the government has to take responsibility for violence against women. That's why there is a national mechanism to protect women's human rights that was established with presidential decree in 1998. And also, the United Nations already defines violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that result in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, mental harm or suffering to women, including threats such as coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. And even though there are several interpretations of sexual violence, the main idea when sexual activity does not obtain consent is not freely given and the recipient feels unwelcome and unpleasant. In Indonesia, people still don't know about the meaning of sexual violence. They think it's just like a rape or a sexual attack. And then, could you please to go above? Information, okay. Go up a little bit. Okay. Information and socialization about sexual violence has to be conducted, since many students even think that sexual violence just for rape and attacks. And social and behavioral scientists often use the term sexual violence. It's going to be the term far broader than sexual assault. It includes acts that are not codified in laws as criminal, but are harmful and traumatic. And then the teaching the root of gender-based violence against women, such as man's superiority and rights against women, patriarchy, and manpower to control is indispensable. The permissive sexual abuses can lead to normal course of everyday life. So we have to avoid that phenomena. And then women empowerment and mainstreaming should also consider issues of poverty, education and training, violence against women, power for decision-making, human rights, and the girl child. Establishment of National Commission on Violence Against Women in Indonesia can help Indonesian women to report cases of sexual violence in many institutions and campuses to alleviate. That's my sharing from Indonesian perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Umi Retnaningsi. And our third panelist from Myanmar, Ms. No Serser. It's your turn, sweet.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to involve in this webinar. And thanks, Sarom, contacted us to share the content of the Burma, especially sexual violence and women human rights defenders situation. So when I listened from the other two speakers, so same pattern of the sexual violence and sexual assault, so heavy the same in the ASEAN and Asia Pacific. So what that we seems clearly that this is used as a strategy or systematically when the conflict or when the fighting happening in the country. So for me, so I'm also a current ethnic nationality. So as Burma, you may know Myanmar, calling Myanmar. So we had diverse ethnics, many diverse ethnics. So I'm a current ethnic nationality. So I would like to introduce of Women's League of Burma a little bit. Women's League of Burma is formed at 1999. It's already over 13 years. And also we are formed as an umbrella organization with the 30 ethnic women's organization. So you can learn more from our website and a Facebook page of all of our members organizations. So what we are mainly focused on and work for. So we would like to advance of the women's role and women's participation in peace or in the political decision-making level. And also we are also visioning for the build up on established age of Federal Democratic Union in Burma. So this is what we are mainly visioning to have it the change of Burma. So we are struggling today. Since we are ethnic revolution start along with independence from the British colonize. So you may heard the history or the background of the political context of Burma. So there already 3 times military coup happened in Burma, and also over 17 years civil war happened and also ongoing till to date. So since 62 and 80, actually it's 88 and this year 21. So same military have be a coup and also side the power, and as also this time, so they are also side the power. So all three times so from the same military. So this is what I would like to share to all of our here, and that also ongoing ethnic conflict and also human rights violation throughout the country, and especially targeted in ethnic areas and minority groups, include Rohingya community and also ethnic group like the Karen, Kachin, Shan, and other have long been persecuted by the Burmese decades across a decade of the conflict. So this is briefly of the ethnic people fleed from the conflict and fight it. So Karen, Kachin, Sha, Rakhine, so almost all of the ethnic fleed from the fight it because of the military ongoing offices. So here's we had some numbers of IDP numbers. So Burma, so we had over 70 years civil war, and also some people from the current and the Karenni, so they are became the refugee, very long time refugee in Thailand, and also still in Thailand, and some of them already crossed the third country, resettled to third country. So because of the conflict and happening and ongoing, and there the coup also happening this year, that and also the other side, the fighting happening in ethnic area. So within 6 months, we have seen 240,000 of IDP increase in different ethnic areas. So this is within the 6 months that we have collected the data. So here I would like to mention more about the impact of the coup on women. So women's human rights defenders in ethnic are faces grievance risks when armed conflict rake and also evoke within the pandemic context. Like their sister in Arbor area, they seen increased curtailment of civil liberty rights, and also violence inflicts on them. They attempt to assess them. That Women's League of Burma, we have always advocate and raise our voice to international like community to to refer the Jordan or military to the ICC, because whenever we see the conflicts, they use the rape or sexual violence as a weapon. So if the conflict happening in the current, so there are many of Korean women's heavy rape. And if we see in the conflict happening in the Rohingya, there are many women's heavy rape. So in different ethnic area conflicts, that's where same pattern, same impunity. So all those rape and committed the crime, so without taking any responsibility and also taking any action. So that's all they giving how to say impunity, all of the whoever committed the crimes of these like the rape. So state sponsor sexual violence continue to the threat the life of a woman in Burma. This has hold since the military coup, and a woman in particular, when arrested and detained, are subject to torture, and that includes sexual violence and sexual assault. And the military has shown a lack of respect for women by uses rape and other violence me as a one tactic on the intimidate, threaten, and traumatizes. So, and that also the legal system also has been controlled by the military Jordan. Women's rights defenders are readily seized justice and are limited by various roadblocks, include access to the lawyer, and the fees need to go through court. Knowing this, the military takes advantage by the prolonging case and assumed flagged charge. That they are also given the reason of the pandemic, COVID pandemic, and they are not even having the trade and try to fix all of the case that are happening in the courts right now. So since mostly I would like to highlight the cis military coup. So some suffered mental and physical trauma, which impaired their ability to concentrate, work, and development in a relationship, etc. And also some adopt a negative coping mechanism and start drinking and becoming alcoholics. And some let the experience overlap and there where it's becoming their only identity and their only they can talk about. Some are re-traumatized, and when they hear sad music, which makes them emotional, if they hear similar story of attack, they can become very afraid. Some suffer in the aftermath of their trauma, such as being forced to give birth when fleeing conflict. So we have seen a lot of women pregnant and with a new baby mad, and some of they running and they're fleeing. When they will run and fleeing, so they are giving birth during their running, fleeing from the fighting. And some we have here problems because the Burman army soldiers shoot at them or fair or gums close to their ears. And it was also challenging of a survivor victor to be reintegrate back to their community without servants provide to them are available for them. So this is what we specifically hear from the victor and the survivor, and sees the situation at the moment. And the women human rights defenders across the country are also facing a mounting burden, lack of women's security, loss of their civil liberty rights due to the military side the power of components by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic concern also. So these all women very how to say brave, and also lead the protests and actively be in the front line of the protests and evolve in the resisted movements. So they were killed. So include Women's League of Burma members, leaders. So and also include trader. And so we have seen more than thousands of peaceful protesters were killed, including 73 of women. So another is women's participation and organizing. It made the coup and various leadership roles that women have taken in the response to the support their community and evolve in the political movement. And also we have seen many different of the women's activists are also having families. When they run out for their security, they have to bring their family, especially when they have to run out, so they have to prepare the food for the baby, the young baby, kind of the challenge also that's a lot of women human rights defenders are faces. And that's what we are calling and also encourage or giving awareness to the all other neighbor country of a women's movement or other call for the women's leader to for the gender to halt of forms of the gender-based violence, especially aiming to grow in the concern of the report assault against the women in detention, and also the exclusion of the women in politics and Bavaria government large polar women for one during this movement, and the women are defying traditional gender norms to joining army and also participating in protests and volunteering as a medic or lawyer and taking great risks as a journalist. And also we had a very strong action this year that we call the Saron Revolution. So we have shown up our commitment and our energy or power in that day of International Women's Day. So defend women's role by smashing and measuring tumbles. And also we also have shown the women's roles and women can be involved in the democracy movement or revolution movement. So this is what we mainly call for the international and other community to stay with us and force with us for this call. So reject military coup and refer the military to ICC for the crimes against humanity and any other crimes, and also global armed embargoes and a targeted session, and support human rights assistant to IDP and support women human rights defender and a human rights defender. So this is briefly I'm sharing now, so you can have a more question after that. Thank you so much.
When the responsibility should be to negotiate